Hey, folks, greetings from the Offensive Security Group here at Secure IT 360, coming at you with a new episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. You've got Mr. Spencer here, as well as myself, Brad. Today, we are going to talk about common Windows security mistakes, how to address them, and we're going to kind of give you guys a little bit of a cheat sheet on some things to check out in your environment. Make sure that you're not creating or setting yourself up for failure is probably the best way to look at it. Fortunately enough, we have Spencer, who knows a thing about a thing, and so we're going to kind of deep dive into that. So, you want to give us like the elevator speech of what we're going to talk about and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as part of our internal pen test, we do something called an endpoint assessment or an endpoint review, if you will. It's essentially a 120-point inspection of the endpoint. And these common Windows security mistakes are things that I see all the time during our internal pen test. Usually day one, day two, we're kind of getting our feet wet, so to speak, kind of figuring out the environment, what's installed on the endpoint, what can we use, what can we abuse. And these are common vulnerabilities and misconfigurations that we see often. And the reason I wanted to call them out is for a couple things. One, a lot of these are low-hanging fruit. These are things that you can go check right now in your environment if you're listening. And number two, these are things that are kind of systemic in that they lead to other misconfigurations, or they can lead to the environment overall just being less hardened and less secure, and kind of give attackers a little bit more room to wiggle, if you will, than they really need to. So in this episode, I kind of wanted to break down some of these common Windows security mistakes. And when I say Windows, I mean Windows endpoints, like Windows 10, Windows 11, desktop, laptop, some of these common mistakes that we see made and how they're made and kind of how to fix them. And one quick kind of notion to like how these come about is a lot of these are software mistakes, like vendor product requires you to install it at the root of C, for example, which we'll talk about. So a lot of these are just vendor misconfigurations. Some of these are admin mistakes, but we're going to talk through all of that. That's kind of the 2-minute kind of intro to this episode.
Yeah, I love it. And I think there is probably this misconception out there where, hey, I did a vulnerability scan, right? I don't have any vulnerabilities, or I understand what these vulnerabilities are. And so if I get a clean scan back on my Windows box, I'm good to go, right? And that's simply not the case. And that hasn't been the case ever. But we're still kind of living in that box of I have a scanner, I have vulnerability management, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to take away from vulnerability management. This is a different level of thing, right? And these I would argue pose as much or more risk than outdated software in some cases, right? So it's important to look at the picture holistically, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
Definitely. And so on that note, something that is one of the first things that I see that I think could be really improved and really hardens many environments is just restricting PowerShell. I talk about this all the time. I'm a big PowerShell fan myself. I love it. But when I'm doing an internal pen test, one of the first things I'll do is I'll see if I can run PowerShell.exe, see if PowerShell ISE is available, see if PowerShell version 2 is installed and available. I'll kind of get a sense of what applications I'm allowed to use and which I can use, and those that I can use for scripting, mainly PowerShell for kind of the workflow that I like to use for pen testing. So I say PowerShell as kind of a proxy or a starting point, or a gateway drug, maybe, if you will, to application control, right? Because application control, application allow listing, whitelisting, etc., is kind of the end goal that I think, from a maturity standpoint that you can get to harden your endpoints. So PowerShell restriction to me is a really big deal because we still see threat actors using PowerShell. One of the best examples lately is the click fix. We've been talking about it in our OffSec chat on Teams, but click fix is this attack, this social engineering attack that tricks a user into copying a command, or it copies it for you into your clipboard when you go to a website, right? And it brings up a banner and it says, hey, you got to run this command. Well, it automatically copies this PowerShell command to your clipboard, and then it tells you how to do like the Windows R key and run, and then paste in that command. And that command a lot of times is some sort of PowerShell command that will launch some other attack, right? It's going to download some other piece of malware or do some other nefarious thing that the threat actor has kind of designed as a result of that.
Yep.
And if you can restrict PowerShell access, and especially if you can restrict PowerShell from accessing the internet, that will neuter that attack. That will absolutely help mitigate that attack. And this click fix attack is something that we're seeing quite rampant recently. At least we've seen quite a bit of attacks of these and these click fix campaigns going on recently. So that's one big takeaway for me.
Yeah. So let me ask this question, right? So command prompt access to Windows is not new. PowerShell technically isn't super new, but relative to the lifespan of like NT 4.0 going forward, what makes PowerShell so dangerous by comparison to like running batch files?
Yeah, I mean, really, running batch files is the same too. Like if you can run CMD and you can run batch files, CMD files, things like that, you can achieve some of the same results. The big thing with PowerShell is there are a whole big number of commandlets built into PowerShell, and it's rather ubiquitous, right? Like everywhere that you have Windows, you mostly have PowerShell, some version of PowerShell. So the PowerShell itself is just more of a powerful language than just straight batch.
Would you call it a powerful shell?
Powerful shell, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like Palpatine in that scene where he's like unlimited power. I'm like complete nerd right now, but
I love it.
But PowerShell is more powerful as a language. You have there's a lot of built-in commandlets that allow you to do a lot of different things, like download files from the internet or interact with the operating system. You can even run .NET within PowerShell and call .NET commands within PowerShell to like hook into the Windows API, for example. And that's how some of our AMSI bypasses work. So PowerShell is very powerful language as given the name.
Yeah, and that's really kind of where I was going with that question is you can just do more faster and easier in PowerShell. It's the reason that it is, air quotes, the language of choice for threat actors on Windows machines. There are some benefits using PowerShell. Like you said, the commandlets are huge. There's a much more expanded functionality within PowerShell that exposes sensitive parts of the operating system that were just harder to get to via command shell previously. And there are aliases like wget. You can also do obfuscation much easier. And so there's just a ton more capability that exists within PowerShell that has never existed at the command prompt without installing additional software. So PowerShell shows up on the scene, and suddenly we have a tremendous amount of bad guy tools that can be used for bad guys' purpose, right? That we've never had access to before. We don't even have to install anything; it's there for us to use. And so, I would say it is infinitely more dangerous than a more traditional command prompt that we would be used to. Like, at least those of us that were managing like Windows, 2000 and stuff like that.
Yep. And PowerShell does have some protection mechanisms. There's logging. EDRs will typically capture PowerShell telemetry and ingest that. Even if you don't have script block logging enabled, EDR products are getting good. They're now, capturing that by themselves. There's AMSI, which is anti-malware scanning interface to help prevent, malwareless or script-based PowerShell attacks. Of course, none of those are perfect. There's constrained language mode, and then of course, like restricting PowerShell altogether, right, with some sort of app control product. So what we recommend for our clients when we do a pen test is definitely look at least software restriction policies to start. Better than that is like App Locker or some sort of WDAC, app control for business, and then implement constrained language mode to help really kind of lock down PowerShell where it's not needed.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there is a perception, and you can speak to this better than I can, but there's a perception that, monkeying with PowerShell, so to speak, is going to cause you to not be able to administer the machine anymore, or it's going to break stuff. So, can you address that question and concern? Yeah. And I think that's probably what has kept a lot of administrators from implementing tighter restrictions on PowerShell in their environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So with software restriction policies, you can just restrict it to non-administrative users. So if an admin is on the machine, they're able to run PowerShell. Same thing with other application control products. You can allow certain users and disallow others. So it's very flexible nowadays, especially with stuff like WDAC, App Control for Business, or even third-party products like AirLock or ThreatLocker. They're very flexible now, and that's really not a concern anymore because of how you can customize itemize or detail, specify, if you will, who can run PowerShell, who can't, and things like that.
Yeah, users should not be installing PowerShell modules.
For sure.
Like full stop, right? And so that's what we're trying to prevent. And it's an example of one of many things we're trying to prevent. But yeah, no, that answered the question beautifully, man.
So the next one, since we spent like 10 minutes on PowerShell, my favorite, we'll try to move along a little bit, but insecure applications. So insecure applications, this kind of is a category for me. It includes a number of different things. So applications installed at the root of the C drive, applications that put their path in the system path, insecure service permissions, and then just out-of-date software, like really out-of-date to the point where there's obviously exploits and proof of concept exploit code available for it.
Yeah.
So applications installed at the C and the system path and the insecure permissions kind of all work together in some cases. But what I see sometimes is, it might be, a legal software or an accounting software. The installation process as part of that application will just install it at the root of the C drive. And the reason that's dangerous is because by default in Windows, when you create a folder at the root of the C drive, authenticated users gets modify rights to that folder. So any user on that system can just go in and replace that binary that's running a system, for example, with another binary and execute code as system, for example. And same thing with the system path. If that C whatever product name directory exists and it's in the system path, now you have a DLL hijack opportunity, right? Because you can, or a system hijack, right? You can hijack that system path and run your own kind of executables or DLLs because of that vulnerable, misconfigured permissions on that folder in the C drive. Yeah. And same thing with service permissions. Many times this is like a domino effect where it's installed at the root of C, or it's in the system path, and we can modify the service, or that service is running some sort of binary from a path that we're able to modify. So those are when I say insecure applications, those are some of the big ones that I see related to that.
Yeah, and one thing I want to touch on that I don't think a lot of people fully understand, and that is the order in which files are searched on a system when it is executed. And so a lot of people don't realize this matters. It matters a great deal, in fact. And so when you execute a command, Windows is looking for an associated executable or DLL or whatever it is file for that. And the order that it searches for it in and of itself can create security vulnerabilities. So if I execute, brad.exe, it's going to look in my current directory first. If it does not find brad.exe, it's going to then look through my path. If there is a presence of that executable in any of the entries in my path environmental variable, it will then execute that. And finally, it will go look into system32. What does that mean? Well, if I want to execute like ping, for example, which is persistent in the system32 directory, but I can edit a directory that's in the path. I can put ping.exe in there that is a malicious program, and the system will execute that before it executes the one in the system32 directory. So I can, like you see, hijack is the technical term for it, but I can absolutely do that if I have right permissions to any of the prior search paths leading up to where the binary actually exists. Hopefully that makes sense. So I would encourage people who aren't familiar with this process to go check that out. And there is a defined process, and there are well-known exploits associated with it.
Yeah, and that's just a feature of Windows. It's just how it works. Like, it's not a vulnerability or misconfiguration. It's just abusing how Windows works. And one of my favorites for that is if we have a writable system path, we will use what's called a phantom DLL or a ghost DLL. And what that is it's a DLL that Windows is looking for but doesn't exist on the system. So there's something called WPTS extensions.dll that gets loaded when the task scheduler service starts. So when we have a writable system path, we drop our own malicious WPTS extensions DLL into the path, And then when the system starts up, that executes our DLL, and away we go. So that's one of the fun ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool stuff, man. And really, it just comes down to understanding how Windows works, and why this creates a security risk. And so I think all of those, those four that you
Yep.
listed there are
And to your
important to
point,
understand.
yeah, and to your point, that's not something that Nessus is necessarily going to identify right outright.
Yeah.
I have seen it identify some of these like insecure software findings that I just mentioned, but not consistently. And I haven't recently seen that Nessus flag that one before.
Yeah. It's not going to, right? Because again, it's operating as intended.
Yep.
So yeah, and that's something that again, you just have to know. It's a feature of the system, and it does create a tremendous amount of risk. So all right. So before we skip to the next one, quick admin for you guys. And if you've listened to the recent episodes, you've noticed that we've started talking about, hey, we do this for free. We love doing these podcasts. We absolutely love it. But if you do need a pen test, we'd love to do business with you guys. And so we're, kind of opening that up to talking with you guys about that. So we obviously do a lot of different things here at Secure IT 360. And so we'd really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys or work with you on any type of cyber engagement that you might have or need. And the other thing is, feel free to like, subscribe, share. That really helps us out. You guys have been amazing at doing that. Our podcast has continued to grow, and we absolutely love it. And, we also welcome criticism, man, and suggestions on topics. That's something that we're starting to get a little bit of, and I really love hearing from listeners who are like, hey, man, I'd really love to hear your spin on whatever this topic is. And we will absolutely cover that as quickly as we can. So keep that in mind. All right. Local admin password use.
Yeah, so local admin password use slash, I added this one just now, which is regular users with local admin. So I wanted to include that because allowing users with local admin rights kind of defeats some of the security controls, or kind of defeats the purpose of some of the security controls on endpoints, right? And especially because no matter how computing has changed, the one thing that has stayed the same is users are using a device.
Mm-hmm.
They're using a device, and recently it's been a Windows device predominantly in the corporate environment, although Macs are becoming much more common as well. And in some industries, like creative industries and marketing and advertising, they're very predominant, right?
Yeah.
But the endpoint, it still is being used to log into Microsoft services or to log into the SaaS application. So although the threats have kind of changed on the endpoints to some extent, and where those users are physically, those endpoints are still very important. And allowing users to have local admin rights in a traditional kind of environment is pretty dangerous. But the main kind of talking point for this is local admin password reuse. And this is something that we see most of the time when we see this, clients are not familiar with LAPS or other solutions. So local admin password use is using the same password for the local admin account on all of your devices.
Mm-hmm.
So the worst case scenario is you're using it for workstations and servers and kind of everywhere else. So you're kind of using it as your kind of go-to admin password kind of thing. I've experienced that in the past in my own work, and I've experienced it on pen tests. It's something that is an easy kind of trap to fall into, but there are better solutions, namely LAPS. Windows LAPS now is kind of like the newer alternative. It's built into Windows. You can sync the LAPS password up to Entra ID. So a lot of great features with that. But local admin password use is something we still see pretty consistently. And it allows us as an attacker to pivot in the environment, to move to other systems that might have more sensitive data or might allow us to continue our attack further. Maybe it allows us access to a server that then is running some scheduled tasks as privileged accounts. So this local admin reuse thing is a really important problem to kind of pay attention to.
Yeah. And it was pervasive for years because we didn't have a good solution, right? And lapse is like, what, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. So, in the XP 2000, maybe 2003 days, lapse was not a thing. And so when you're building out these gold images for both servers and workstations, you obviously have to provide an admin password to set up the image. And then you just blast that thing out, using, what was it, Altires? Remember that one? It was a network imaging product, but
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, it was old school. But yeah, but the problem was you really didn't have a lot of options for like
Yep.
modifying the image. So inevitably, this password would become pervasive in your environment,
Yep.
whatever it was, And usually they were pretty decent passwords, but you don't
Yep.
always have to figure that out, right? So Laps came along and really changed the game, but it was kind of a ripple. And so I don't know that everyone is still up to date on the presence and
Yep.
existence of Laps. And so I would encourage you guys to check that out. It is an absolute game changer with regards to that specific risk. Like it eliminates it completely.
Yep.
So
Yeah, it's really good.
yeah, I completely agree
Um,
with that.
I remember. I think Semantic had it. It was Ghost.
Oh
I
yeah.
think it was
Yeah,
Semantic Ghost.
you had a boot to a floppy or a CD.
Yep.
Like they didn't even have USB boot at that time. Yeah, I
Yep.
remember Semantic Goes. It worked. It's
Yep.
kind of.
Yep. And then we started just OEM, right? Like straight from
Yeah.
Dell
Yep.
or whoever you get your PCs from and stuff like that.
And those guys, so we did that as well. But you had to upload a gold image to them based on their
Yep.
format or whatever. But you still had the same problem, right?
Yep.
And that was whatever you set that to during the build process is what
Yep.
it's going to be. And so
Yeah, we did that for our DR provider as well. So like we had a whole DR process where they would like ship us an RV kind of thing with like 50 computers in it or whatever, and so we would regularly send them updated images for our
Yep.
PCs. So like if our building was burning down, we could set up a satellite thing and
yeah. Same. Yeah, and bandwidth at the time was so expensive that we would send them hard drives. Like with the image on it. We would FedEx them overnight because uploading an image would take longer than FedEx would take to get to the location.
Yeah.
So this back in the what were those called? T1 lines?
Yep.
Yeah, they were like $1 billion a year for a T1 line, and it was like 14 meg or something. Like it wasn't even good.
Yep.
It was just more reliable than everything else.
And you were just so stoked to even have that.
Oh, absolutely, dude. Yeah.
So the next one is exclusions. So there's two kind of exclusions or categories of exclusions I want to mention. One is in antivirus or EDR products, and the other is in app control products. These are the two I most commonly come across during internal pen test / assume breach. So AV EDR products, super great, absolutely must have to protect your environments. The downsides, though, are when you have finicky applications or applications that need to have exclusions or particularly excessive exclusions, right? Like where you need to allow a whole directory or multiple directories or multiple processes or things like that. The mistakes that we often see range from like intentional mistakes, like they whitelist, and an admin will maybe whitelist an entire directory that maybe all users can write to.
Yep.
Or unintentional ones, which we see a lot of times, which is like typos. So you actually miss like a parenthesis, or you miss like a slash, or you miss some sort of character in the path to the file name, or you misspell the process name and it's not the actual process name that you're trying to whitelist. So those kind of like human error mistakes I see from time to time as well. And the same with app control. I did an engagement recently where the organization had a third-party app control product. It was set up pretty well. I was pretty impressed with how it was functioning and the control and the defense mechanisms that were built in, like blocking PowerShell from accessing the internet. Super cool. Really liked it. Out of the box, it worked really well. There was just a few kind of things that made it a little bit weaker that the admins had kind of introduced by allowing certain processes, certain directories to execute programs that maybe were a little bit too permissive. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the mistakes I see with like exclusions.
Yeah, it's a great way to undermine the integrity of your EDR environment is to do those exclusions. And so just be extremely sure that you have to do it, and when you do, you need to minimize that scope as much as possible.
Yep.
And I can see cases where it matters. I know in my admin days there were a lot of servers that couldn't run AV because it would just kill them.
Yep.
And we still see that on internals. We still see servers that are like fully don't even have it installed, or if they do, it's severely neutered. So you just need to understand that risk, man. And if you live in a world where that's necessary, you need to isolate that device as much as possible.
Yeah, and my advice for exclusions is to document them and have like a valid reason for having it. Make sure other people in the department know that that exclusion exists, and you kind of talk and figure out, are there ways that we can get around this so we don't have the exclusion? And if we do, make sure it's documented, make sure it's something that you revisit
Hmm.
on a periodic basis if you can. If it's
Yeah.
some temporary thing, you obviously want to have a process to remind yourself of that exclusion so you remember to review it and look at it. But then even if it's like a long-term thing, like it's just the software vendor, it just has to be this way, still reviewing it from time to time is a good idea, just to make sure that you haven't reintroduced any mistakes or any issues, or somebody has tried to update it or change it and
Yeah.
made any mistakes. So exclusions are always something that I like to kind of review on a periodic basis
Yeah.
anyways.
Scrutinize them. Yeah, absolutely, man.
So last one is log files / credential files. So this one is maybe a little bit unintuitive. You would think like log files probably don't have that much information in them, but some of them actually do. And there are quite a few deployment files and installation files, log files. You could even pull credentials from Windows Event Viewer, depending on the systems that are interacting with it. So log files, event logs, installation files, deployment log files, those kinds of things are really attractive for an attacker because it can tell them system information. So SCCM is popular for this. There are log files related to SCCM where you can figure out what the site is, what the server name is, things like that.
Hmm.
That information is you can obtain by other means, obviously, but it just makes it a little bit easier for an attacker to discover some information about the environment in other systems in the environment. And with log files, of course, you run the risk of having credentials in those log files. So one
Yeah.
of the most popular examples of that is PowerShell console history.
Oh
And
yeah.
I actually found credentials for a number of IT admins on a recent engagement by getting local admin to a bunch of systems and then searching all those systems for PowerShell console history files. And I found a bunch of credentials that way during that engagement.
Yeah, and that's not a new problem. It just it's new in that perspective, right? In the application world, which is really my background, we had to be very critical of logs of caching stuff that could be in memory for bad guys. This is along that same vein, right? We just have to be just understand where it could live, check it, and yeah, no, I completely agree with that, and understand, especially the benefit of PowerShell logging everything is not
Yep.
necessarily always without risk.
Yeah, and one of my favorite kind of credential files to look for is the unattend file.
Oh yeah.
It's part of Microsoft deployment. It gets created during that process, and there is a way to remove that sensitive information from those
Mhm.
files. You can purge that out. But if you forget, if you don't know that this is an issue, those credentials get hashed out there get hashed out there in base 64, encoded actually, not hashed. So they get encoded in base 64, and you could just obviously decode them
Yeah.
and get the plain text password from the unattend file. So the other reason I like to call this out and mention it is because these make great deception assets,
Yeah.
canary files. So if we know that attackers are looking for credential files, they're looking for log files, mremote ng config files, things like that, PowerShell console history, use that to your advantage and kind of turn the tables on the attackers, turn those into deception assets, canary files, whatever you want to call them, and then alert on when somebody's kind of interacting with that file, trying to read that file. Give me a good high fidelity alert, low false positive type of alert. I did a whole deception webinar recently.
Mhm.
So go check that out. If you just go to offsec.blog and you search for deception, or search for us in deception, you'll find it. It's all over social media as well. But I did a deception webinar where I talked about some of these things if the deception angle is kind of interesting to anybody.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too, since we're wrapping up. If you guys are looking for a specific topic and you're curious if we've talked about it, the best way to search for it is on offsec.blog, and so you can actually go in there. All the podcasts also get posted as blog entries, and so like if you want to know, like, oh, I'm looking for web application security or Windows or whatever it is, so you can go there, and all of the episodes. We have 141 episodes as of this episode going live, and so there's a good chance we've talked about something that you might be looking for. So I would suggest that you go check that out. It's just an easy way to look through the episodes and check out what we're doing. Yeah, so that's all we got for you guys today. Thank you for listening or watching. Yeah, go check us out at offsec.blog or securit360.com, and we'll see you guys next week.